Hi, I'm Kat Connor, a Kiwi and a crime writer, and you're listening to The Break It Down Show. I've been listening to The Break It Down Show for a few years now. As a writer, this show is a magical resource, peppered with fantastic conversations. I learn something in every show. And it feels just like yesterday that we celebrated the 500th episode. And yet here we are, celebrating 1,000. This is amazing stuff, Pete. I love your show. I'm here to introduce today's guest, JB Yani. JB writes a very cool historical YA time travel series. For those of us who grew up in the 70s, it feels a bit weird thinking of that era as history. It is. We're old. Had to happen eventually. JB and I met on the Break It Down show a couple of months ago. And if you're as fascinated by time travel as I am, then you're in for a treat. As you get to know JB a little bit more and hear more and more about how she does what she does. A little bit about me before we get into it. 2020 saw the end of my 12-novel FBI-based crime series starring my favourite character ever, Ellie Iverson. You can find out more about us on my website, catconnor.com. And if you head over to writersplot.org.nz, you can find out about the coolest not-for-profit bookstore in the world. It's 100% worth checking out. Later, though, not now. I am in the future, talking to you in the past. That's every day for me in New Zealand. It's pretty cool and almost time travel. Let's see what JB Yani makes of that.
Lions Rock Productions.
This is Jay Moore.
This is Greg Crew.
This is Bryce Vine.
This is Dexter from The
This
Offspring.
is Nathan
This
East.
is Sebastian Younger.
This is Daryl.
This is Stuart Copeland.
This is Mick Gillette.
This is Andy Summit.
This is Dr. Bob Greenberg.
This is Gabby Reese.
This is Rob Bell.
Hey, this is John Leon Guerrero.
Hey, and this is Pete A. Turner.
Good afternoon or morning, wherever you are located today. I am with the Breaking It Down show.
That's right. The Break It Down show, bringing you always just different perspectives, different people, different things. And today we've got JB Yani. She is the author of the Time Bender series. And because, I'm such good friends with Kat Connor, even though Kat and I have never met face to face, we've hung out a lot of times. I thought I would bring Kat in because Kat has written 12 novels in her Byte series. And so I thought this is the wonderful opportunity to hang with some ladies who write books for a living and just get some insight as to how all this works and then bring in some of Kat's expertise. And I just think it's fun. Kat, it's always fun to hang out with you. By the way, for everybody listening, it's tomorrow where Kat lives because she lives in New Zealand.
I actually live in the future. It's fantastic.
Cheers and happy holidays to the both of you.
Thank you very much. And you also.
Tell us about the Time Bender series.
Sure. The Time Bender series is set in the 70s, and it's about four siblings who discover a unfinished formula at their boarding school, and they complete that and discover they've unlocked the secrets to bending time. They build a machine and begin an adventure to change some things in history, at first to try and solve some of their personal issues, and then later to, learn about things and participate in things in history and in the future. So, it's a series. Book 1, Time Benders and the Machine, and Book 2, Time Benders and the Two Promises are out, and the third book is on its way.
Oh, that's fantastic. I love this premise because it's sort of like the when we all kind of imagine, if I won the lottery, what would I do, right? And this is the same kind of thing. Like, what would you do? Like, what would you fix, in your own life? I would save my grandma who doesn't get in that accident or,
Yes.
And then you get altruistic, and then it probably all goes to hell.
Yeah. Everybody, I think, has a moment in their life where they wish they could go back and fix something or change something or bring someone beloved back. Absolutely. But there's also that prospect of jumping to the future to see, what's going to happen there. And so, so it's an interesting premise that I think everybody, has a little bit of fascination with.
Leaving room for you, Kat.
No, I was just thinking, would I change anything is what I was thinking. And you know what? I would not. Because if I changed one little thing, it kind of stuff up the entire line.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, there is that, right? In
Um,
purely scientific circles, they talk about those paradoxes all the time, that butterfly effect or that
Yeah.
grandfather effect. What if I went back and, startled my grandfather before my father was even conceived? Would I even be there when I got back? Or if you change that one tiny little thing, what is the ripple effect of that? Absolutely. And I play some of that out a little bit in the stories so that people can see, oh, what if I did that? What would the implications be down the line? So yeah, it's always an interesting, intellectual discussion to think, okay, if I jumped forward and learned that lottery winner that didn't have a winner and jumped back and bought that ticket, what would I do with all that money? But there's also those ripple effects of how that might change all kinds of things about your life or the people that you touch with your life.
And then what about is there an all-knowing, omnipotent God type character in this time universe where like if you break certain rules, it like resets and brings you back or anything like that?
Well, no, but they do discuss the spiritual side of it. Is there a plan for everyone, and is there an omnipotent power that's supposed to be sort of running things? And by jumping in and out of that time machine, are they messing with a power they're not supposed to mess with? But it doesn't reset anything for them or do anything for them, but it's something that they absolutely discuss, whether that sort of all-knowing God or power is behind everyone's lives and what they might do.
Are there any
Interesting.
are there any religious aspects to this at all? Is this a book like I know you talked about C.S. Lewis and some of your bio stuff. I don't know if any of that stuff has crept in.
Yes, there is a bit of a Christian undertone to their discussions about that spirituality, and they do have a significant loss in the launch of the books where their parents are unfortunately killed in an accident, and so there is a bit of undertone to the grief process and the spirituality of that and how to see themselves through that. So there is an undertone to a Christian belief in the stories. Yes, that's where I come from. So it's a little bit of my story as well.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's a viable way to approach the problem, and having an access to a God in your storytelling is certainly helpful in terms of like they're breaking all of the rules. There has to be some kind of limiter somewhere. So,
Yes, and what they do come to is, you do have an overriding, sort of path planned out, but you have the ability with your free choice to drive it off on different forks. But what they do come to is at the end, there is an end date for everyone, and you don't really have a lot of control over that.
Yeah. I can see how that would be a thing.
Yes.
We do have an expiry date. We do. It's just the way humans are. Unless
Yes.
you can travel your way into the real future, and then you're what, 200 years old?
Well, they do jumps forward, but it's altruistically motivated because they have a friend who might be facing something in their future. So they go to find out if that's the case so they can plan for it. But again, that being one of those paradoxes, if you know what's coming down your road, what do you do with that information? And, in the story, it plays out as kind of an emotional roller coaster as they find out what that person might face. So again, it's about just because you can, do you really think you ought to jump backwards and forwards in time?
and do they encounter any kind of guide along the way, a fellow time traveler or someone who kind of teaches them the rules, or do they just kind of blunder their way through it all themselves as they try to figure it out?
They blunder through it and learn as they go so far. I mean, I'm not sure what will happen in maybe in a future book, but right now they're kind of blundering through it and learning as they go. And that was one of the things that I wanted to show was, young people can learn things on their own. They don't necessarily need the internet to do it for them. So, that was one of the messages I was trying to convey was, you can figure things out and you can do amazing things if you think it through and research it a little bit and learn from your mistakes.
So is the whole series set in the 70s? Sorry, 70s.
Yes, the whole series is basically set their present time is in the 70s, but they go back to various places, significant times in some history and sometimes in the future. And one of my favorite subjects is US history, so they jump around in some significant US historical times and meet people and learn things and experience things that they wouldn't normally and where they're from. And their jump forward is, into close to this present time, but more in the 90s than into the 2000s. So far, anyway.
Quite cool.
Why did you pick the 70s as your home time frame?
Well, couple of reasons. One, it's the one I'm the most familiar with because that's when I grew up. But also I wanted to create a story that where that wasn't so dependent on cell phones and the internet and, take, readers out of that space for a minute and, show them there are other ways to learn things and find out things than, opening up your phone and going to Google. So that was really, I wanted to kind of take them out of their element, their current element.
It's a really interesting way of doing it. And as soon as you said 70s, I went, oh, yeah, okay, brilliant. That's like the last set of time where there were no cell phones, no internet, no computers at all, apart from, I think, the military had them back then, I think.
Yeah.
So, I grew up in the 70s too, so it was a simpler time, and all your research had to be done at a library.
Exactly. You had to go to the library, you had to look things up and go through microfilm and things like that. And you couldn't simply, look it up on the internet. And, that was really what I was going for, was to, show a different space and, use that as a launching point for the dramatic shifts, both backwards and forwards in time for them.
Is there some kind of antagonist in their story, or is time the antagonist? What do they play off of?
It really is playing off this idea of if you just because you can, should you, and the whole element of the rules of the universe are kind of their antagonist because there are certain things you can't do. You can't show up and meet yourself and tell yourself something. And, there are some rules, some sort of universal rules about managing time and space that's sort of their antagonist, in the story is that so far, again, so far, that's how it's working its way out.
It would be pretty cool though, wouldn't it? Being able to show up and meet yourself and go, hey, you're about to do something really stupid. Maybe rethink.
Exactly.
Are your time travelers, are they inclined, what kind of actions do they take? Like there's the whole, if you could go back, do you kill baby Hitler? Or, I would always say, why wouldn't you mentor baby Hitler into a kinder, gentler,
a different human being?
Yeah, exactly. Instead of bashing in a baby's head, it could be another approach, because you can always go back and be like, if that didn't work, let's try again or whatever.
Yes, their first several trips in their time machine are to go back and shift an event so that they can bring their parents back or help someone make an accident not happen. So they do things, they act on things to sort of shift events in the hopes of staving off that accident or that death or that event. So that's their attempt in the beginning. When they go forward, it's really more to find out. So they're doing some research in the future or trying to find out about something. But in the past, they start out trying to shift something, not dramatically, just a little bit, because they're wise enough, seemingly wise enough to know that, lopping off the head of a baby probably isn't a good idea. Um, and they're quite frankly, because they're teenagers, they're a bit more selfish minded in the beginning, and what they really want is to bring their parents back. And so their actions are really about trying to shift something about their parents' life to take them on another track so that accident doesn't happen. And later they try and shift something about a friend they have so that someone doesn't die in an accident. And, there's varying degrees of success and failure with those abilities to shift things.
Kat is a little disappointed that there's not more death and chaos because in her book, people get killed in the craziest ways.
Yeah, there is some death. Um, People do die, but they die by accidental basis, not some significant crime occurring. And yeah, that is one of my other reading loves is those kinds of mysteries. But it doesn't really fit with this storyline for there to be a lot of nefarious action going on. But again, who knows? In the second book, they all grow a little older.
Yeah.
So at some point, they'll be adults. So maybe there'll be something a bit more nefarious in their future if they keep using that time machine. And so, we'll see. I haven't really thought it out more beyond the current work in progress. So
Yeah.
we'll see what happens.
Well, I sure as heck hope so. I like a little bit of balance. Let me ask Kat this question because this is interesting. Kat's written a book in a series like this. When you hear about this time traveling notion, it's such a great story machine. Do you want something always there to counterbalance this altruistic approach? Like what teenagers would come up with, like I want Johnny to like me, so let me shove Carol out of the way in the time machine. But also just like the overall, like you can only have. I don't know, like only have so much good. There has to be something horrible to balance out the great good
Well,
that's created.
there's always balance. You
Yes.
can't have good without bad, can you? We wouldn't know if it was good, would we? We wouldn't have the first clue. So, if I did many, many years ago, write a short story that was a time travel one, but not a big time travel one. It was more about a rift in time.
Hmm.
So at a certain time of the day, they could reach through this rift. So one person was living not far in the future, but in the future. And that was really fun because something like that, you could actually meet the person
Right.
face to face because it's still the
Right.
same timeline, just shifted.
Yeah, exactly. And there is some balance. There is tragedy here because they realize they can't bring their parents back, and their efforts do shift it and make it worse for a little while. And they do have outcome from their activities when they go far back into pre-Civil War time, and they sort of shift society in a very detrimental way, and they have to figure out a way to go back and fix that. So there is that balancing activity, but so far they've managed to come out of it in a fairly positive way. And if nothing else, in terms of the tragedy of their parents, learned something from that and grown closer as a family. So their tragedy does have some positive outcome.
Is
All
there
right, that's good.
how much do you?
Yeah.
But everything has balance. All stories have to have balance. You have to have something that they're playing against to
Yes.
win worthwhile. It's human nature, I think.
Yes, exactly. And maybe finding some good in the midst of that tragedy is the lesson.
How
There's always
how hard do you lean? I mean, these kind of stories have been around for a long time. I mean, going back to the Greeks, like Euripides, he tells the story of this exact story of, gosh, what's his name? Admetus, I think is his name. And he goes back
Yes.
to get his wife. And he's like, I want to bring her back across the river. And it's like, yeah, you can do that. However, that does cost something, and that's
Right.
somebody else's life. Are you steeped in that kind of work? And do you know that you're calling to it? Or do you like play off of that canon so you can say, here's what Euripides did. Here's what I'm going to do.
Well, I don't specifically name any of the paradoxes or the history of time traveling
Right.
stories or anything, but I do play off of some of those messages and those storylines. And, as an example, the butterfly effect. In my current work in progress, they go back and talk to someone who's part of, later on in their life, the assassination of Abraham Lincoln, and they shift things just enough that it changes all kinds of things, in the future. So I play off of those, and sort of play them out in this example of these children's time travel, some to much worse ends, some to, the recognition that they can't change certain things. They just need to learn from that and adjust to that, that loss or that tragedy or that change in their life. So yeah, you have to sort of play that out in a way that, the way I've been doing it is to play that out in a way that delivers the message without coming out and saying, you have a cost if you go and do this. You come to that conclusion, you have a cost if you go back and change something.
Yeah, I like that. Better to weave it in than preach it.
Yes. Yes, I'm not much of a preacher unless you're one of my children.
Hey, so you've done something incredible. I mean, you've not just written a book, you've created a universe, and you've got the second book out and the third book is being written. Like, you are past so many barriers. And I know you probably know that, but you never hear it enough. So, wow, incredible that you've done this. What got you through these impossible? I mean, everybody has a book in them. People have universes they'd like to write about, but they're not sitting on a show that goes to 90 plus countries, talking to a lady from New Zealand and all these things. I mean, you've done this. How on earth did you get it done?
Well, I'm a voracious reader, and I'm of the opinion you can't be a great writer unless you read a lot. Um, so there's that, and I've been writing, starting things, writing little things probably since I was a teenager myself. And I, just sort of epiphany one day had this idea of these kids going and doing this, and how fascinated I always was with the idea of moving through time, and sat down and started a storytelling event. And it turned into this. So it's a little surprising sometimes when you think about it, that you have this story that resonates and touches people. It's been a wonderful experience.
Can I ask a process question?
Sure.
Are you an outliner or a pencil?
Am I a pen and paper writer? I'm sorry.
No, an outliner. Do you outline all your story ahead of time, or do you just sit down and write?
I write certain notes. What question, like as I got to the second book, what questions did I leave open in the first book that I need to address? Where are they headed? What kinds of major plot lines do I want to cover? Where are they going in the time machine? What are they going to learn? So I would call it more notes than an outline, but yeah, and I'm a notebook person. I don't take those kinds of notes online. I write them in a notebook.
I've just about finished the notebook for the book I'm writing right now. So it's panic time now. We know we're almost finished because the notebook's nearly run out. And like you, I make notes. I don't outline. I run with a series of notes. When something pops up, I write it down.
Yeah, and you can refer back to it, I think, as you're starting to write. You can refer back to those notes and go, oh, yeah, I wanted to do that. Did I cover that? I want to make sure I get that, that character's development going here, or that message from that character, or, it's helpful to have those notes.
Very, very. Do you go over your old notebooks when you're writing the new book?
I do keep them handy because, again, I've written questions in the margins as I'm writing the novel. Make sure you cover this at some point, right? Because you've left this open question. Because it's now a series, I can leave some questions in book 2 and put them in book 3. So I do keep those notebooks handy when I'm writing the newest work, so that I can refer back to that and make sure I tie those things off, that I've left open.
This is interesting, and Kat has talked about this on the show before, but she's 12 books in, and so she's created for herself, because she kind of channels and does the non-outline thing. She leaves Easter eggs for herself for the next book, or 5 books later, where she's like, oh my God, I somehow knew to leave this door slightly ajar.
That's back in those notes. I want to bring that back here. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And my brain just seems to do it randomly.
Yes.
It's not even in my notes. I'll go back and look at something and go, what I need is for there to be a code 5 books back. And when I open it and have a look, there's a code 5 books back. And I'm like, yeah, well done, brain.
Yes, exactly. I think that keeps your readers engaged, because if they're a good reader of your work, they'll remember those things as well, and appreciate the fact that you tied them off later on.
Yeah, well, it's usually because mine are all standalone, so it's not something that was ever left open. It was something that didn't exist until it's pointed out. Like with my own words. Go back in time, sort it, come back again. No, it's actually, I don't know. My brain just works weird.
Well, I think we all have one of those brains.
I think we're normal.
Yeah, let's call it normal, creative. And then I wanted to ask both of you, but I'll ask Kat first and then have you go, JB. But it takes a lot of trust to trust that your brain is good job, brain, like 2 years into the future, So how do you let go of, because everybody tries outlines and they try, all these different methods of writing the book, but you find your spot, and you guys were sort of channelers. If I was like, Kat makes best friends with her characters. She cries when they die. She mourns them physically, so she really is channeling this alternate world that she does that. So I guess, Kat, for you, I'm asking, how do you develop the trust in your process? And then the same question to you, JB, like, how do you trust that I don't have to outline this, I don't have to be a formula, I'm going to create this, it's in there, but how do you know that? So both of you, but go, Kat, go first.
I don't know until it's done. So I don't 100% trust my brain. I just try and not think about it too much while I'm writing it. And then I get to the end and I still look at it as scenes, so I don't ever see the whole thing until it's like edited, until my editor goes, hey, we're done. And then I'm like, whoa. Then I'll read it with new eyes.
Yes. And
then my brain's going, who wrote this? That was a really good line. How does that And I'm like, okie dokie. So I'm not 100% sure I trust myself, but I know it all works out in the end. So there is some trust, just not. Sometimes I look at it and I go, I don't even remember how to write. So we have those days.
Yeah. I think I'm a slightly different. I think my trust evolves as I write. And, in terms of my universe that I've written about, I sort of allow my characters to have conversations in my brain as the story develops, and am suddenly surprised, oh, that's where they're going. I find sometimes that I'm just as surprised at, oh, that's where it's supposed to go. And it's a sort of an epiphany moment. Oh, that's what I really wanted to do there. So I get to the end and go, okay, that's really what I wanted. But like Kat, I don't go back and reread as I'm writing. I wait till I'm all done and then go back, and it's almost a new story for me because I see it more in its entirety.
All those little things you forgot you wrote or you don't remember writing.
Yeah.
Which...
Exactly. So
when you do make edits to your book, though, like in terms of the storytelling, are you cutting back? Are you like, oh, I need to add context? Or what kind of things do you, when you do that first read through with the new edited copy, are there many changes?
For me, I think there's an equal amount of removal and adding. As I read through it, I realize I didn't give enough information about something, or I didn't describe something enough. That's where I'm adding. And I do get to points where I go, oh, that's a little bit redundant. Take that whole conversation out. They've already said that a couple of times, or they've done that in another way. So my editing is probably equal part add and remove. Um, I, I don't generally change the story very much. It's more an idea of bringing something out that I didn't think was told enough, or removing something that didn't became unnecessary as the story unfolded.
Yep, same here, pretty well. Same kind of thing happens down here.
Okay, so you're on book 3 now. When do you think book 3 comes out? Do you know yet?
uh, it will probably be March or April of 2021. It's just about finished, and my process after the draft, the first draft, is usually 2 or 3 months before I think about getting it ready for release.
And then what's your goal with this series? I mean, obviously, it'd be great if everybody discovered it, went bonkers, and they made a movie out of it and all that stuff. But realistically, what do you hope to accomplish with all this?
Um, what I what I hope to accomplish, I think, is to I mean, I'm targeted more to younger readers, young adults. But what I hope is that it becomes a favorite, like I have my favorite, and touches someone, or sparks some interest in some history or some math or some science that drives someone to learn something new. That's really what I hope. If somebody decides to make a movie about it, oh, that'd be wonderful, but that's really not my goal. My goal is to know that I'm touching people who are reading it, that it's doing so, it's doing something for them. The characters are relatable. They know someone that was one of my characters when they were growing up. They relate to the message. That's really what's important to me.
Get kids reading.
Yeah, keep reading.
Sometimes it's really hard to get teenagers reading, and something that attracts both sexes too. You've got the time travel always seems to appeal to a wide range. So I think you could be well placed there, couldn't you?
I have had a lot of adults come to me and tell me that they really related to it. I don't know if that's the 70s thing or the science that they're fascinated with, but I've had a lot more positive reflection from adults than I expected, because it is geared more towards a teen and young adult crowd in terms of the characters and the language and the side stories going on. They're really more a young person's story than an adult story.
An awful lot of adults read young adult fiction.
Yeah, I've learned that.
It's quite big. I noticed that in the bookshop that it's adults buying YA for them, not for their kids.
I'm desperate to go read through all of Laura Ingalls Wilder's books again. And that's fiction. I mean, it really is. So I totally I'm desperate to read it all again. It
Yes.
is something that we do.
It's one of my childhood favorites, actually.
Yeah, and I want to read it as an adult. One because people tend to dig her up and then chastise her and call her something, without ever reading her books or understanding the history of the time. I want to go back through and do my due diligence and read, what are some of the greatest books written in American literature,
Yes, and because I'm a lover of history, you can't take a person out of context of their life and judge them by a different century's standards. That's just wholly unfair to their work, their message, everything about them. It doesn't matter whether you're talking about a general or an author. I think it's unfair to take them out of context and judge them by another set of standards than the one they lived by.
Especially when you don't know their adversary. What were her challenges? Just the weather was such a antagonists their entire well-being, their life.
Exactly. Exactly. You're talking about a family that was in a place where there were very few people living. You don't understand her challenges to learn simply to write, let alone to put together a series of books about her life, based on her life. You don't understand those challenges, I think, until you reread it as an adult. You don't really understand that aspect of those stories.
I like that. Well, the idea of judging history by today's standards is ridiculous, for one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Look at the fiction of history and go, well, this was wrong. Yes, according to us it was, but that's how it was. So we're not saying it's right. We're just saying that's how it was.
Exactly. You're talking about different, not better.
Yeah.
Right.
Different, not better. And I'm sure if you picked up, Abraham Lincoln and put him into 2020, he would have accomplished different things, not better things or worse things, different things. So, you have to leave historical figures in their timeline to really understand them and keep them in their context, not judge them by, your current standards of evolution and in humanity.
Yeah. And also read some history and learn some perspective, because I saw a thing the other day where they took a quote and they said, is this quote racist? And it's like, well,
Yeah.
who said it? What was the line before that? Like, there's so many,
Yeah.
like, just this one line. Come on,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
what if it's like,
Was it part of a letter, a book, a speech?
yeah,
Right?
where they
There's some
asked a
context.
question, that put these, yeah, there was so much context missing. It's like, how on earth can we ever decide that? And
Yes.
and
How
what kind
can
of
you
dick
judge
am I if
that?
I decide that it is, like, without knowing anything?
Yeah. Yes. Exactly.
We're having a raging debate in our house at the moment because it's nearly Christmas, and my favourite Christmas song is Fairy Tale of New York by the Pogues. Well, there is definitely some slurring going on in that song, and my youngest is horrified.
Yes.
And mortified. And I was like, you put that in context, that is how people talked. That is a slice of history. This is a couple fighting.
Right.
And say things, and you can't just, and there's a cleaned up version, which I don't like, quite frankly, because it's not true to what it was.
Yes.
You can't take songs or books or whatever out of historical context and then judge them.
Yes. Yes. So, yes, read Laura Ingalls Wilder again, even though they've banished her from libraries and the awards that were given in her name.
I know. It drives me mental,
Yes.
that this
Yes.
is just award B, like, come on. No matter what happens, she still wrote some of the greatest books in American literature, and it's just, it's crazy.
Well, and I read the other day that there were schools taking To Kill a Mockingbird out of their curriculum, and I thought,
Wow.
Yeah.
What are you doing?
Yeah. It's the same thing with Huck Finn, because there's a word that we don't like in there. And I think that drives me crazy about these things is like we take it on like these one little itty bitty bits, but in the foreword, the man writes about, he's like, this is written in the language of its time. There's reasons why I've done this, and he's accomplishing a lot, Mark Twain is. But if we just read the damn foreword, and then teach that and say, look, this is one of the greatest. First off, if Mark Twain writes it, you don't have any business changing it. He wrote it perfectly, right? You cannot write it better than him. I'm getting mad now.
Yes, exactly. What you want is to be maybe at some point compared to a writer like that, right? In fact, we turned on the television the other night and they were showing Gone with the Wind on some cable channel, and it came with a disclaimer.
Goodness
Oh,
gracious.
wow. Yeah. I can't really speak because I have seen that same disclaimer on the same movie, and I went, oh, really?
Yes.
Now you have to warn people that
Yes, we have to warn you. We have to warn you. There's some things in this movie that we just don't agree with. We don't like, but we're going to show the movie anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The,
I know that movies like
the other thing I wanted to say is Shane McGowan, the guy from the Pogues, one of the things that makes him great is he's literally a regular working class dude, and he acts like it. And yeah. And sometimes Christmas for working class folks is stressful and you don't have enough money. And it doesn't always go the Laura Ingalls Wilder way when everybody buys everybody else the gift. And they sacrifice. She sacrifices her pony to give her mom a stove, and all these things.
Yes.
It doesn't always go that way. Sometimes people are so freaked out they're horrible to each other because Christmas is a hard time to get through. And you have to sing and write and talk about those things because it is part of the human condition.
Right.
It really, and we shouldn't be censoring it because it is creative. It's art. There's no censorship. There's no place for censorship when it comes to the arts.
Yes, precisely. And, the answer needs to be if you disagree with it, don't open the book, don't watch the movie, don't buy the book, don't pick it up from the library. If you really are that adamant about disagreeing with the context of that writer or that artist, don't watch it, don't read it, don't look at it. You have to respect their work as it is, and if you don't agree with it, don't own it.
Exactly. Walk away. Walk away. You don't have
walk away. There's a book about something that you'll enjoy somewhere in the bookstore.
Exactly right. That is so true.
Yeah. The other thing is instead of banning books, just get kids to actually read books. I mean, I read some of the book. I could not get to Ethan Frome. I couldn't. I'm like, you're on a damn buckboard. Will you hurry the hell up and have something happen? I couldn't get through it, And so I would rather kids read books. And then if there are things that we have to deal with, let's teach them from a point of view of literature and give them a compare and contrast. There's a great course in AP English out here in California where this teacher does that. He's like, here's perspective A, here's perspective B, and more importantly, here's perspective C. Now you read these three books and let's synthesize these thoughts, based on what you're hearing from incredible. It's like Howard Zinn, which is like the people's history, a traditional academic history, and then like a corporate history all together. And you're forced to deal with multiple realities that don't blend well. And it's like, oh God, dang it. And it's such a great idea for a course. So get them reading and get them thinking. Don't stop it from that ever happening.
Yes. Yeah. I'd love to teach a high school literature class where the books they read were Brave New World and 1984.
Yeah.
Look, just read these books. Look, they're not even that thick. Go read these books. And now we're going to talk about that and talk about the society you live in and compare and contrast. And what do you think about that? That's the purpose of literature, not, discounting it because you think that author said something terrible or said it in a way that was disrespectful to someone. It's what does it make you think about and how does it make you feel? And if the answers to those questions are, I believe that message or I absolutely hate that message, that's okay. That's okay. So, yeah.
Opening dialogue.
Why is it that authors are so pro non-censorship? Why are they so open to even, bad ideas being available? Because it does seem to be a thing for authors to not only do that, but to purposely put their finger on the sore spot and go, I'm going to write this thing that's going to be so uncomfortable for you to read because we have to. What makes authors make that choice?
I think it's, the driver of their creativity is I need to put this out there. I know it might get a bad reaction, but I need to put this out there.
People have a right to see all the sides of a story.
Yes. And it's not something that should be censored because you disagree with the message.
Exactly. Otherwise, where would the conversation be? Everyone would have the same view. We would have a very bland, very vanilla society.
Yes, and plain vanilla, one size fits all belief system does not make for a creative, innovative society.
No, it doesn't. There would be no technological breakthroughs, that's for sure, because everyone would just be in their box.
Yes.
You're not prepared to tell your truth.
Exactly.
Where's your honesty?
All of these things all go together too. Like one of the things I know for sure is if you spend time in literature, if you read the classics, whether they're Greek or Spanish or all these different people that write things, Thomas More, you read these people, Kant, philosophers, everything. All of a sudden you realize that a lot of these things have been covered. They didn't figure it out then. We certainly haven't figured it out now, especially if we're not steeped in, all of these people that have already put a lot of thought into these things. Just read, like you said, read more, understand what is, what the problem is that you're trying to solve. I mean, if you don't have a command of Orwell and you're looking at government and you're thinking that they have things figured out, go read Orwell, and then you're gonna
you're gonna mess up. Look around; they're messing up.
Everyone does though. I mean, that's the whole thing with being human. Everyone messes up. Who are we to judge, really? And I think also get that because we mess up. We write things and we look at them and we go, wow, that is utter rubbish. But we have the right to write rubbish if that's, what
Yeah, you do. You have the right to write rubbish, and and let people decide if they want to read the rubbish.
Because it's not for everyone. There is no book in this world that every single person likes. We all have a way of telling a story to get what it is we need to tell across to the people that we're telling it to. And we can't censor it. You just can't. And sometimes the language is quite colourful. Quite colourful at times. But that's the it all goes to context though. That's the way they're living means there are some extreme stress moments and things come out.
Right.
Not everyone's got their lid on all the time. It's not nailed down.
JB, I wanted to ask about your ego when you write, right? I mean, obviously, we're all adults. We're all past 40 years old, and we sort of learn to reckon with our ego. Sometimes we let it out of the cage and let it go crazy, and we're like, "That's it, ego. Get back in your spot." But how do you deal with that? I mean, you want to write a great book, but great books have to be discovered. And by the way, I also want to ask about the business side of things, because you write this book, but it's like, well, now you got to go promote it. You've got to be saleswoman of the year for your book. You've got to, come through and do it. Talk about these aspects, these things that you don't talk about normally. I mean, the book, yes, great, fantastic. I love it. But what about the other aspects?
Well, to the ego question, I think, my ego gets out of the cage when someone writes something bad about what I've written. And I have to tamp it down and look back over that and go, okay, so there's this feedback. That's probably legitimate. And remember, reading is a very personal, very subjective act. Everyone reads in the context of their life. And gathers what message they will from what you've written, and you have to respect that, and find what might be a valid form of feedback in there. But that's where my ego rears its head. In terms of the business, I guess that was the most shocking part of all of this, was knowing that I somehow needed to become an expert in marketing and sales in order to achieve the goal of people reading my book. I needed to actually, stump around and talk about it, and that was for my ego, a difficult thing because I tend to not be the trumpeter of my own horn.
Of course.
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah. So it's been a real step outside of my comfort zone activity to talk with people and go to book signings and events and put myself out there in that way. And there's something, hearkening back to the, being naked in front of a crowded room dream about, marketing your work because I think that's when I feel the most vulnerable is there standing in front of that room of people talking about,
Yep.
this thing I've written and convincing them it's worth buying and reading.
Yeah. Yeah, it's such an important thing to say. And because I've had a lot of authors on, I've learned a lot about this and screenwriters and how they cross over. When you do that pitch, when you write that book proposal, yeah, your idea, that's when people come to me as a podcaster, like, here's my idea for a podcast. I'm like, I don't care about your idea. I don't care. What I care about is, can you produce a podcast? How many hours a week can you commit to producing this thing? Because your idea doesn't mean shit to me if you don't have the capability of getting this done. If you don't have money or time,
Right.
your idea is BS. So like same thing when someone drops a book proposal off, I've got the idea for the next great American novel. Great. Is it going to sell? Who are your competitors? Who's done this before? How are you going to market this thing? It's a business plan. It's not a proposal, and if you
Right.
can pitch this thing and say, I'm going to make all of us money, best book ever.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't think very many writers start out thinking about the fact that it might be a great idea or it might be a fantastic story. It might be the next great American novel, the next great piece of classic literature. But if you can't get anybody to read it, it's not going to matter. So, you really have to put some thought in and teach yourself who is your market, how will you reach them, what kinds of things will appeal to them so that you can get your story out to where they will see it and recognize it and buy it.
Yeah.
And that was a big learning curve for me. I don't have a degree in marketing, not by a long shot.
All of
So,
the authors that I know that have been like super, super successful, like holy cow, we never thought they would get this far. They've all said to me, basically, for a long time, they were the number one buyer of their books. Because they
yeah,
had to get them out. They had to buy their book, to help boost it in the rankings and get it out to people to get them, like they had to do that to really, and I don't mean
yeah,
giving it away for free, but I mean like they spent money because the higher it goes in the Amazon rankings, once you reach a certain point on Amazon and you get enough reviews, your book will start to sell itself because they'll push it more, but until
right.
you get to that point, you're the engine of the sales, whether it's through marketing or just like, I'm buying a book, send it to you, read it, pass it on to a friend, do something to get that book out there so it can be discovered because discovery is everything.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I spent a lot of time carrying around a box of books in my trunk of my car because I was doing all kinds of events at libraries to get to know my target audience. And, surprisingly, oh, you wrote a book? Do you have one? Yes, I do. You know, yes, as a matter of fact, I do. So, yeah, you really have to constantly be thinking, that might be a buyer of my book, and that's a huge mind shift.
I actually yelled at a customer not so long ago in the bookshop. Not even kidding. This is my new
Yeah.
tactic. I'm at the door, down near my books, and I just yelled, "You should buy my books, they're fantastic." And then I ran away. That was mortified that those words came out of my mouth, but he did. And then I told him Caro's book as well, so I was like,
See?
yeah, new tactic, just yell at people. Oi, buy my book.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess I
Not
haven't reached it yelling at them, but I have gotten a lot more assertive than I was in the beginning. So that remains my learning curve is, getting a little bit more assertive about my selling and marketing.
I think it's believing in yourself. That's what authors struggle with. We do, all authors. If we came out of the gate going, look at us, we're fantastic, we'd be writing like rubbish all the time. But we come out going, there's a big scary world, don't want to do this. So we can write the book, but it's fronting up.
Yep.
And saying, actually, this isn't half bad. And that's like a real Kiwi term, not half bad. I remember my father saying to me, oh, this isn't half bad. That is huge praise in New Zealand. That means, you've done it.
Yeah.
Let me help sell some books here real quick. So anybody who wants to get a good Christmas gift for their kid, here's a chance. JB Yanni's books are available on Amazon at the link below. That helps us out. That helps her out. And they're called Time Bender. And if your kids are into fantasy or time travel or any of these kind of things, highly recommend this book. And then also for Kat, here's Kat's page. If you like crime, fiction, FBI related things, I call her like she's the modern day Stephen J. Cannell. Her stuff, JB, her stuff is right on the edge of reality. She'll predict things like she predicted this global pandemic, by the way.
I did. We freaked out. That was like, whoa.
Yeah.
What have I done?
And so here are some great authors.
It's a shame you couldn't also predict the cure.
I did. There is a cure.
She is a cure. Yeah, and also it also comes.
There is a cure. Yeah,
it breaks back out, right? Like that virus doesn't want to go away. It keeps
comes back.
Yeah, that's sort of the point to single cell parasitic organisms is they don't want to go away.
No, they want to survive. But yeah, I mean, like here, just imploring to the audience, like here are two real people who really write books and pour their hearts and souls into it. And I've read Kat's books, and actually, JB, one of the great things I get to do, because I used to be a spy in the Army, she hands me her books early when there's espionage aspects, and I get to like brush them up a little bit.
You get to be one of her beta readers?
Yeah, and I'm tickled pink by it. I just love doing it. I'm like, hey, here's this super minutia-based thing, but I know she cares about it, and so I don't tell her how to write a story. I'm just like, these things can be smoother. And then she's like, got it. And then she, boom, fixes it, and I shut the hell up and get that out of the boss's way.
Everybody needs beta readers like that. I have science people as my beta readers.
We've all got to have our little specialist team. But like I've got medical people, and I've got Pete who brushes up my spy stuff, and I know some people in law enforcement, sorting my law enforcement out. So
we find those specialists, and we turn you into our beta readers, so we can be, on target with our stories and cover those details that matter. I agree. Those details matter.
And it is really just small stuff. Like I give her the grain of an idea, and then she's like, "Oh, I need to do all of these little things," and it's remarkable. I see it in the finished product, and I'm like, "Yeah, I didn't say too much. I didn't tell her how to write a book." It's really neat to be able to do that.
That's a whole scene.
Yeah. Hey, Kat, plug your bookstore
as long
too.
As she's acknowledging your efforts, I guess it's okay.
Yeah, yeah, she acknowledges it for sure. She I got a cameo in her last book, so I'll take it. Yeah. Kat, plug your bookstore real quick so everybody in New Zealand can know where to go support New Zealand authors.
Okay, go to www.writersplot.org.nz. You can buy all our books online, or you can drop into the shop in Upper Hutt and come see us, and maybe me, I don't know. We only stock Kiwi authors, so if you're looking for really, really good Christmas presents,
there's the place.
.nz. Yep.
Anything else you want to plug at all, JB, besides your fantastic books?
Oh, wow. Well, on my website, I do have, some information about the actual science and those paradoxes, which is always interesting reading material if you're interested in the actual science behind the book. So, if you want to check that out, that's where there's some more details about some of the story, where some of the storyline comes from.
Okay, and I got that link in there. And in general, I'm going to put all the links in the show notes. Here comes the link for Kat's bookshop as well. So between JB's website, and look, if you guys can't find JB Yanni or Kat Connor, Kat Connor, Connor, on the web. You're goofy. Everybody should be able to find that by now.
I'm not suggesting it. I'm the writer here.
Yeah. There's Kat's Amazon link. There's Kat's website. There's JB's Time Bender series website, jbyani.com. Super simple. And then there's her Amazon link. I'll put all that stuff in the show notes. Anything in closing, Kat? We've had a chance to talk with JB for about an hour. What do you think?
Really enjoyed it. I would like to read your books, though. I think I'm following you on Twitter now because I think I did that last night.
Wonderful.
And website, how do we look around? Because I was like, oh, time travel. Woohoo.
Yeah.
But moving in the future, it's kind of a thing. You know?
Yeah, we'll probably get there at some point. It's just, it might be a bit chaotic.
Yeah,
And maybe we can get a collaboration book between you two, like a collaboration short story. That'd be sweet. Just like a,
Yeah,
you know,
That would be really fun, wouldn't it?
that would be fun.
yeah, absolutely.
And then JB, anything in closing for you?
No, thank you very much for all this time. And Kat, wonderful to have other authors and their insights. And, you know, it's nice to know that I'm not as crazy as I thought I was.
Oh, no, you're as
that I
crazy as you
share.
thought you were. Let's make that clear, because Kat's fucking bonkers.
I am, but true.
No, that's okay. Maybe it's just comforting to know I'm not the only one there.
There's a bunch of kooks in the loony bin. Yeah.
Exactly.